How are you? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world options trading program. And for our Sunday game sermon, what we're going to really quickly go into is disinformation in social media and how it's used against you. And this is something I would normally teach to my dark persuasion students, but we're going to kind of do this today to give you an understanding of how this particular strategy and also tactic is utilized against you in the social media space. And you won't just see it in social media, you'll see it in your personal life. You may see it in the mainstream media. What I mean is like television and radio. But it's become really, really popular in social media because of the democratization of media via social media, how anybody can jump online, and then also how certain people have kind of been implanted into the social media space to do certain things, and they're utilizing very basic tactics that they've been taught by the people that put them in position. However, the average person in mainstream doesn't really understand what they're utilizing. Now, you don't have to utilize these tactics in your life. Part of what we're doing is to get you to understand, right, what your adversary or what your opponent or what a group of people that may be in opposition to you, what some of the strategies and some of the tactics that they're using, right, to affect you and not allow you to get to where you want to get into this particular world. And we start talking about building power in the world. And what we're going to talk about is the disinformation strategy, right? But first, I want to read you a quote from somebody to really get you to understand what's going on. There's a quote from Tupac in the, I want to say mid-90s. And he talked about, he was describing a group of people that were doing that whole East Coast, West Coast media campaign. And, to paraphrase him, he said that they're like what Judas was to Jesus. They're only here to cause confusion. And you really got to understand that this was going on in the mainstream media, right? Where we start talking about print and radio and television. So this is way before social. This is the mid-90s. And Tupac was trying to get you to understand is that you have these cadres of people and they're only here to spread confusion, right? That's their goal. They don't have another goal. And so you really got to understand that he was trying to really communicate that to the audience, that this is their function. This is why they're here. Well, we're going to go into the disinformation strategy, really how it's used on social media, but you're going to see parallels in other parts of your life once I kind of implement and roll this strategy out to you. Now, disinformation, the definition of it, to be very basic, is that it is information and it is media that is created and used against you, and it's done purposely, right, to cause harm to you. And when I say harm, I don't necessarily mean physical harm, but it is done to cause harm by creating something that the person that is creating it knows when they're creating it that it is untrue. So the difference between I'm telling you that something is true and I don't know any better, right? But if I know better, but I'm still presenting it to you because I want to get a particular objective as a result of the information, that is disinformation. So I want you to really understand that. Let me give you a really quick story to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. But real quick, let me take a drink real quick. Okay, so I was watching a show, and these people I know got like an online platform which they discuss particular topics. And, had like now because we in this COVID era, everybody was on the Zoom call. There's about 15, 20 people on this particular topic. And one of the people came into the particular, Zoom call. And what they did was they created this narrative. Now, this is not a new narrative. This is an old narrative. And they created this narrative around what was going on in the world and why they were able to have success. And they created this narrative and they put that narrative out on the platform. Now, this narrative that they created is really factually untrue. But it's a narrative that has been promoted online by certain groups and certain people that are trying to become big in media, right? And it's been going on a very long time, but it's really not historically true. It's really not factually true. It's really not economically true. But they were allowed on this platform and they were able to create this disinformation. And what happened is exactly what I knew was going to happen. As soon as they said what they said and they gave their little spiel, I knew exactly what was going to happen. Everybody else on that particular Zoom call, they got in their feelings, they got defensive, and they started going on this campaign to correct that person. So they felt very inspired to, well, now I have to, instead of me discussing my points that I was trying to lay out on the call, I have to stop doing that. And I have to now go and correct you because I'm so concerned that you have given this incorrect information, which is really disinformation, to this particular audience. And I don't want them to leave believing this. Now, I want you to understand something. What that person did that created that disinformation, they did that purposely. That was not an accident. I know who this person is. I've seen them on other social media platforms. These people are invested in creating a narrative that is untrue because they believe that can get them more media exposure. It can get them college speaking tours, and maybe can get them access to certain type of platforms where they can get compensated for, promoting a particular narrative to the masses. They did this deliberately. And because they've been taught this disinformation strategy, they understand that when I go into these spaces in which people don't necessarily agree with what I agree in, what I do is I come with disinformation, right? I come with disinformation. And what I can do is that because these people don't understand dark persuasion, they have not actually been initiated, they haven't had anybody teach them anything. And even though I can look at this woman and tell that she's a lay woman, I can look at her and I can tell by the way she conducts herself. She, by her people, have been taught little minute tactics that she can utilize on the mainstream. And because they don't know any better, they react to it a certain way, right? As soon as she started doing what she's doing, I immediately know what she was doing because I know what's going on. I know, who put these people in position to do what they do. And I understand how they train these people. One of the biggest things you can learn about your adversaries as your enemy is you have to understand their strategy. A lot of times you focus on what you do, but you got to understand what they do because you can understand then what they're going to do next. So what they did was she was able to create this particular disinformation, put it on this platform, and then everybody, instead of them presenting the information that they wanted to present and essentially put their case and their evidence on the table to kind of support what they were talking about and their points, they now started trying to correct her correct her disinformation, and they started trying to challenge her disinformation, which is exactly what she wanted to do. And so now what she can do is take that particular piece of content, she can cut it up, she can go back to her audience and say, well, look at these people. When I gave them the truth, look at how they reacted. And this is why y'all need to continue to rally around us and the movement that we're in. See how that works? So not only was she successful in creating disinformation on that platform, she now can take that particular content, take that back to her audience, her following, and now she has something that she can present to them of proof that they're actually on the right path. You got to understand how this works, right? So that's one scenario. What you'll often see in social media, if you really observe, is you'll see people consistently creating disinformation. And this is what they do. It's almost like a ship in the water, or maybe like a person laying mines inside a field. And so every few feet we lay a mine. So if you want to try to mine sweep that field, it's going to be very, very a long-term process because every few feet we're going to drop a mine and you don't know where they're at. So now you got to take a particular piece of equipment or a dog and try to mine sweep this area. And you got to be very meticulous about it because if you miss one and somebody steps on it, it's going to, essentially injure them. So what they do is that they consistently create disinformation. So they go on social media and they create disinformation, right? And then what happens is the audience reacts to it and now gets involved in correcting them. They jump back on social media 2 days later. They create more disinformation. The audience reacts to it and tries to correct them. They come back on social media 3 days later. They create more disinformation. The audience reacts to it and now has to correct them. What have they done? They've gotten people that are in opposition to their message to spend all their time, energy, and resources on correcting their disinformation. Because that person is so worried that I don't want this false narrative or this disinformation to be in the mainstream. So what I now have to do is invest time, money, and energy to correcting it. But what you don't understand is that that's exactly the game that they want you to play. Now, their audience, the person that's creating this information, their audience is going to pretty much believe anything that they tell them. They're not going to challenge it because if you notice, you have platforms on social media where either the person ignores any challenge to what they have to say, or if you challenge what they have to say, they say, well, you're on the wrong platform. You need to leave. They will not allow anybody to challenge what they have to say. And if you ever study some of these people, they ever get onto a platform in which they can't play that power dynamic game Well, I'm just going to either ignore you or I'm going to tell you to get off the platform. When what they say is challenged, they get flustered because they really have never really had what they say actually get challenged because they themselves know that that is disinformation. So because they never prepare for the disinformation to get challenged, they really try to avoid being on any platform in which it gets challenged. And if it ever does get challenged, you'll find that that person is no longer on that platform. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, study Jalen Rose defending Kwame Brown on ESPN, right? Study him defending Kwame Brown on ESPN, right? And then study what happened to Jalen Rose in regard to ESPN as things went on after. And I'm not saying he defended Kwame Brown like he stomped. He just kind of got the two people that was creating some of this disinformation about Kwame Brown, kind of challenged it a little bit. He just kind of challenged what they were saying. And what we saw is that there was a fallout behind him doing that because they were interested in continuing to create the disinformation. And once somebody challenges it, right, they really don't know how to defend it because they know it's disinformation from the gate. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So I'm giving you these examples. So what you're normally going to see on social media is that this person is going to continue to create disinformation with the goal of getting their opponents or getting their adversaries to feel like they have to correct it, right? And then what their adversaries or their opponents will get so involved in and so preoccupied with is actually correcting all the disinformation that they're making. So now they've won because they just create more disinformation. If you challenge their disinformation on their particular social media platform, the first thing they'll probably do is just ignore you, right? If they can't ignore you, they will say, well, you know what, if you don't like what I'm saying, you can just get off my platform. That's how they deal with it. They will avoid a scenario where they have to answer for their disinformation because they know they can't support it with any facts, right? So they will really be selective about, let me make sure I only expose myself to people that will not challenge my disinformation. They won't challenge it. They'll either step over it. They'll ask me, kind of like a softball question. I can answer it with more disinformation. I can actually evade answering the question and we move on. I will never put myself on a platform where somebody will ever, and I'm not talking about myself personally. What I'm talking about is I'm speaking as if I'm them. Their mentality is that I will never put myself on a platform where somebody will actually challenge what I'm talking about, right? Because it's going to be based on disinformation. So I did an interview with a sister, I want to say about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, but I think it was about a week ago. And she interviewed me about the options market. And one thing I made sure I did not do is create any disinformation about the market. So it may have came across to where I wasn't really trying to sell it because I wanted to make sure that people that were getting the information, that what they were getting was right and exact. So I didn't come in with a whole bunch of hype. I said, explain exactly, this is what you need to do. This is going to put you in the best position to be successful. And this is the kind of mindset that you got to have. What I didn't come in to do is try to put a whole bunch of relish on a hot dog or mustard on a hot dog about the options market, because what I want to make sure that I don't do is create disinformation about the market, because there's a lot of that online enough already, right? To where now somebody comes in based on disinformation that I created, and then they're going to connect their bad experience to my disinformation. It's not going to happen. You understand me? So I have, to me, because I don't desire to negatively influence these people, I made sure that what I gave them was 100% right and exact. So just because I know dark persuasion don't mean I implement it on a regular basis, right? But I know it. So because I know it, I can recognize it and I understand what somebody's trying to do. So this is what I want you to start to observe in your environment. Look at the people in your social media environment that are consistently creating disinformation, right? Consistently, not like, and nobody gets everything right, myself included. But look at the people in your environment that are constantly creating disinformation. Look at what happens when their disinformation gets challenged. How do they conduct themselves? I guarantee you they're going to do one of two things. They're going to either ignore it, and I don't mean they're ignoring somebody saying something stupid to them. They're actually ignoring an actual challenge to their disinformation. Or they're going to tell the person that's challenging it, well, if you don't like what I'm saying, just get off my platform. This platform's not for you, yada, 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 because really the platform is for people that will accept their disinformation, right? That's who the platform's for. right? We can go a little bit deeper into the psychology of a person that creates a platform just to disinform people, like the psychology of a person that'll do that, right? Now, let me give you a kind of like a caveat to this before we get up out of here. One of the reasons why a lot of these people on social media that created this disinformation, they hate those automated fact checker responses that come from these social media platforms, is because now there's an automated way for their information to get challenged in which a person doesn't have to spend their time doing it. So if you're on, I believe, Facebook and also on Twitter, and you actually put something out, they have a way of crawling that using their spiders, right? They have particular spiders that can go out and they can crawl that particular text, and they will post up under your post, right, that this has been fact checked and been shown to be incorrect, right? Because Facebook and Twitter was dealing with the fact that you had a lot of people who are very invested in spreading disinformation on their platform. They hate that. The people that are spreading this, they hate that. Why? Because they understand is that instead of having people having to spend their time, money, and energy doing this, now it's just being done through an automated way. And in fact, it's going to get a lot more sophisticated over time. And you're going to start having people, it's going to be a lot more challenging for them to create this particular disinformation. What we saw with the issue with what we would call Corona-19 is that YouTube, because Google has really, really, really advanced spiders, right? They crawl essentially everything on the internet. Was telling people that if you use certain terms in your videos based around Corona-19, it's liable that your video may get taken down, because they understood how many people was creating disinformation about that particular issue on YouTube. And they were not going to allow YouTube to be a platform to be utilized for that, right? And so what they did was they let people know that we can not just take your description, we can also crawl the words that are coming out of your mouth. Our algorithms and our particular technology is that sophisticated. So if you create this type of content on this particular platform, right, it's a chance that it can be taken down, and it might also put your channel at risk, because they understood that there's a massive disinformation campaign that people are creating about this, because they just want to try to take advantage of what's going on behind this particular scenario. So what we're seeing is a lot of the social media platforms are combating this with automation, which means that the people that are creating the disinformation as part of their particular strategy now are starting to feel challenged and trying to figure out, what can I go where they allow me to create disinformation? There's nothing wrong with freedom of speech, right? But should you be allowed to jump on the internet and say 5 times 5 is 70? Should I be allowed to do that? Right? Now, there's no wrong with freedom of speech, but should you be able to do that and nobody says, well, you know what, you're incorrect, right? Should you be allowed to go on the internet and say, well, you know, the moon is made out of Swiss cheese, and nobody can come and say, well, you know, the moon's not made out of Swiss cheese, right? It's just not. You understand me? So yeah, you should be allowed to say it. You got freedom of speech. However, should somebody not be able to correct that or challenge that? And then should we be able to create software that can challenge it just based on your actual speech or the actual text that you're creating, where we don't now have to spend time, right, and labor correcting it? Because what those people really want is for a person to spend their energy and take time away from what they're doing to correct them. They hate the fact that now this is being done through an automated fashion, right? That's what they really, because the goal of this disinformation is to make people spend their time, their energy, and their labor correcting them. So that's less time, energy, and labor that you can be spending doing something else. That's their goal. Like I said, it's like putting a bunch of mines in a field. If I take a field and I fill it full of mines, somebody now has to go behind me and physically remove all those mines. They got to locate them and remove them. Takes a lot of time, energy, and labor, right? What we're going to eventually have is just technology that can essentially scan that whole field, find every mine, and it's going to be very easy to go in there and remove them, or essentially neutralize them, right? That's where we're going. So then that particular technique will be less effective. But that was a very, very effective technique to impede people's progress for a very long period of time. So hope that this particular content was valuable to you. Hope you got something from it. Like I said before, is that you don't have to utilize this particular strategy. But the most important thing is you understand that it is being utilized. So when you see it, you recognize it, right? I want you to be able to recognize it when you see it, not just feel like I have to utilize it because it may not fit with your morals, values, and principles. But you're going to see a lot of people on the internet, especially in social media, that are utilizing this particular type of strategy, right? So if you got any questions, hit me up in the comments. This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, and I'll talk to you later.